It was May of last year and I had just signed the lease on a new house. It turned out the refrigerator didn't come with the deal though, and I had spent most of my money on the house, so I started looking for cheap ones at garage sales. I couldn't find any that way. Then I remembered Craigslist. After just 10 minutes, one popped up, not far from me either. I called the number and a nice lady answered. She said the refrigerator was still for sale, but she couldn't guarantee it was still there when I arrived. So, against my better judgment, I asked her for a PayPal and sent her $75. She sent me an email confirming she got the money, and we set a date and time for me to pick it up. That Saturday I texted her letting her know I was on my way. The house was a nice ranch-style place, probably built in the 80s. I knocked, and this hot, brown-haired girl in very short cutoffs answered. After I picked up my jaw from the ground, I asked for Sunny. She said that was her, and she showed me inside. I had zero reason to be nervous. Like the outside, the house was nicely furnished and smelled clean. We made small talk for a few minutes, until this massive dude, at least 6'8", covered in tattoos, appeared in the kitchen, introduced himself as John, her boyfriend, and said that he would take me to the refrigerator. She disappeared to the back of the house, but never saw her again. John led me through the kitchen to the garage. He opened the door and pointed to the refrigerator. It was all the way across from me, almost sitting against the overhead door. I could barely see it because the garage itself was so dark. I asked him if there was a light, but he said that it was broken, and they hadn't had the chance to fix it. No big deal. He had to open the overhead door so I could move it out anyway. I asked him to raise it, but he said it was also broken. He apologized. I was just gonna have to bring it through the house. This annoyed me, but I had no choice at that point. There was a little light shining from the house. It was gonna have to do. I took 2 steps, maybe 3 into the garage, before I realized there was plastic all over the floor. I looked down and I saw that it was covered, the entire floor. This was when I began to get really nervous. I couldn't think of any reason why there would be, except I stopped in my tracks. John's shadow began drawing closer. Then, off in the corner to my left, I heard a scuffling noise. Everything inside of me told me to leave. Suddenly, I turned around and walked quickly back to open the door. I was surprised to see how close John actually was to me, but I kept going. I weaved around him and said, "I forgot my dolly in my truck. I'll be right back." There was a dolly leaning against the wall not far away. He pointed to it and began saying something, but I didn't stop. When I was sure he wasn't behind me anymore, I ran the rest of the way, out of the door and all the way to my truck. I hopped in it and tore out of there. I don't know what happened after that. I got a few texts from Dawn, but erased them without reading them. When I finally got home, I logged into Craigslist to report them. I was shocked to see the listing was already gone. I looked around for another 30 minutes to make sure. They must have erased it right away. I also called the police to make a report. They seemed a little dubious of my claim, but promised me to check it out. I never heard from them again, and I don't much care. I'm alive, and that's enough for me. As for the $75, there was no way I was going to ask for it back. It wasn't worth getting involved with those freaks again. I haven't gone on the site since. The whole system strikes me as risky these days. Anyway, I got lucky a week later. There was a garage sale in my neighborhood that had a used refrigerator. It was $100, but a lot nicer than the other one, and served its purpose just fine. As I wrap this up, I don't want to give people the wrong idea. I don't think Craigslist is dangerous for you to use. Thousands of folks get stuff off there every day, with no trouble at all. But after what happened to me, I just don't think it's worth the risk. However, if you do find something on that site, you have to be careful. Bring a friend with you if you go get it. If you can, meet in a public place, during the day especially. And most importantly though, use your head. If the situation seems sketchy, just bail. It may mean the difference between life or death. Yours. A few weeks ago, I had to fly out to a small town I'd never been to before, in order to look for a place to live. I'm moving in there in fall to start grad school. My boyfriend decided to fly in with me, and before the trip I researched all sorts of apartments on Craigslist and set up a bunch of appointments. Our first appointment was in the afternoon in this sort of remote residential area. The landlord sounded fine over email and asked me to call him an hour before we came to the appointment to confirm that I was coming. I called, but he didn't answer, so my boyfriend and I started walking to the house and just hoped that he would show up. Maybe 10 minutes before the appointment, he called me. "Are you coming?" he said. He sounded like an older man. and had this very strange, slow way of talking, but I just thought that he was older. Yes, we're in front of the house now. He got extremely upset. We? Oh yes, my boyfriend's with me. You never told me you had a boyfriend. You never said that. It had never crossed my mind to have told him this information, since my boyfriend was not coming to live with me. He was just helping me look for apartments on the trip. I told the man so, and after a very long pause, he said, "I'm sorry. It's just, sometimes, people don't tell me when they're married, and it surprises me. I'll see you soon." Then he hung up. I told my boyfriend about the man, and he said he was immediately weirded out. He wanted to leave, but there were slim pickings in terms of real estate at this point, so I stupidly said that we had to stay, in case this place was the place. As we're discussing it, we see the man leave the house we're gonna view. This man was young and extremely sketchy looking, greasy hair, furtive eyes. He took one look at us and he ran out of the house and in his car, and pulled away from the curb with a screech. Okay, so now we're really weirded out, but this isn't enough for us to bail just yet. And as we look at each other wondering what to do, the landlord arrives. He's in his late 50s, very tall and very strong looking. His eyes are completely blank and empty of warmth or emotion. He slowly walks up to us and says, "I'd shake your hands, but mine are dirty." "What from?" my boyfriend asks. "Work," is a flat reply. He asks a lot of questions about me, completely ignoring my boyfriend the entire time, and he stares into my eyes without blinking. What am I going to do for school? What other places am I considering for living? Is my boyfriend moving in too? I tried to give him answers that were as vague as possible. Meanwhile, my boyfriend asked the landlord the same questions, which he refused to answer. He then said a whole lot of nothing. "Let me show you inside the basement," he said. At this point I should have noped out of there, but I didn't. I kept on thinking he was an eccentric old man in a small town, and we're city folk, and that we were just feeling paranoid. My boyfriend, on the other hand, wanted to get out of there, but he followed us as the man led us into the back of the house, away from the street, to this sort of detached shed. He opened the door and we saw that there were stairs leading down to the darkness. He flipped the switch at the top of the stairs and the light didn't come on. Normally the response was, "Oh crap, the lights are out," or something like that. But he just said, and slowly walked down into the darkness. Then he stood there without moving in the dark and said, "Aren't you coming down?" "There's nothing to see if the lights are out," my boyfriend said. The landlord just stands there for a long time, then slowly walks up the stairs and closes the basement door without saying anything. He then took us into the house, and weird and increasingly creepy things ensued. The front door, the only exit to the house, locked automatically. When my boyfriend tried to fiddle with it, the man got really upset and told him to leave it alone. He managed to get it open secretly though. The man kept on trying to box us into small rooms, and according to my boyfriend, kept reaching his hands into his pockets, only to take them out away when he caught us looking. On Craigslist and in person, the man claimed that there was a grad student already living in the house, but the evidence of that seemed arranged. There was neat piles of generic textbooks on the table, but not other things a 20-year-old might read. There was a bowl of fruit on the table as well, but no food in the fridge or pantry, or even utensils. There were maybe 3 t-shirts in the closet, but this supposed grad student wasn't even out of town. The landlord couldn't even say what school he went to, or how long he'd been renting the house for. Finally, the man had showed us every single room in the house but one. This one he refused to open, claiming it was just the attic, and that we didn't need to see anything up there. He gave us several reasons when we inquired. It was unfinished. There was furniture up there. It would smell bad. This last one I truly believed, because standing near the door it smelled absolutely terrible. Finally we made our excuses and bolted out of there as fast as we could. The man walked us out, pretending to go to his car to leave, and when he thought we had finally turned the corner, he slowly sauntered back into the house. My boyfriend, fixated on the idea that there was something wrong with this guy, Googled that man that night. We found out 3 things: that he was a pillar of the community, known by a lot of townspeople, that there was no evidence of him owning or managing a real estate company as he claimed on Craigslist, and that he had listed his home address as the very house we had been touring, the house where the grad student lived. This is by far the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm very glad that I never went and rented at that place, because who knows what would have happened. When I was 21, I transferred to a college in San Francisco. I checked out a room for rent on Craigslist. It was a really nice 2-bedroom apartment. It was cheap rent and close to campus, so it was the ideal spot. The girl who lived there was 29 and her name was Beth. She was tall and wide, and she had jet black hair and wore pale makeup. She seemed nice, although a little quiet, but she seemed to like me and agreed to let me move in. So far, so good. My first night there, we went out for pizza, and that's when I could tell something was a little bit off about her. Throughout dinner, she kept on telling me how much I looked like Shia LaBeouf. I didn't know what to say, so I just shrugged it off with a thanks. I mean, I look nothing like Shia LaBeouf, so it just didn't make any sense to me at the time. When we finally got back home, she asked if I had seen her room yet. I said no, and so she took me to go see it. Her walls were covered in posters of Shia LaBeouf. She even had a printed out photo of him all over her mirror. She owned all his movies. I just didn't know what to make of it all. It was creepy. The whole night she'd been saying I looked exactly like him, and now it was obvious to me that she had a full-on obsession with the guy. A few weeks passed and I never really saw her that much. We didn't spend any time together really. She would always come home from work and practically run to her room. She would spend the whole night in there. She had this really creepy high-pitched giggle, and I would hear her giggling through the walls all night. I wondered what the hell she could possibly be doing in there. Occasionally she would come out and talk for like 2 minutes, and she would always be slurring her words, so I suspected she was drinking a lot. Sometimes she wouldn't even say anything. She would just stand in the hallway and watch me in the living room. I would turn around and see her, and be very surprised and say, "Hello, Beth?" And then there would be this uncomfortably awkward pause, and she would give out this really creepy high-pitched giggle. It was so uncomfortable being around her. She gave me the chills. One night I woke up at around 2 a.m. because I heard what sounded like the front door being unlocked. I came out of my bedroom and all the lights were off, but I could still see Beth standing at the front door. She had her face against it. She was turning the lock back and forth over and over again, and every time she turned the bolt, she mumbled my name. Max Barker, Max Barker, Max Barker. Seeing her standing in the dark and mumbling my name really freaked me out. It doesn't help that she kinda looks like a bigger version of the girl from The Ring. I just quietly went back to my room and tried to sleep it off. One night in particular, I was watching The Gladiator and she stumbled out of her room and turned on the living room light, forcing me to pause the movie, which was annoying. She then asked me if I wanted to hear about her ex-boyfriend. It was an uneasy segue into the topic, but I said sure, then awkwardly sat back to listen to her. 10 minutes into her story, she was so riled up. She was screaming at the top of her lungs about their breakup. I was worried that the neighbors were going to call the cops, and she wasn't listening to me when I told her to lower down the volume. Amidst all the screaming, one thing she said really freaked me out. She was in such a fit and she yelled, "I slit his throat." That was a big game changer. Suddenly I had no idea what this girl was capable of. She was practically a complete stranger, and everything I had seen and heard of her was becoming alarmingly disturbing. After a few more minutes, she told me thanks for listening, and she started doing her giggle. I got out of there pretty fast and went to my room to go to sleep. I had a pretty unsettled feeling about being in the house with her, and what's worse is that there was no lock on my bedroom door. I pushed the edge of the dresser in front of it to act as a little barricade. I then woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my dresser scraping against the floor. Beth was pushing the door open. I turned on my light, shouting at her to stop. I could see her through the opening of the door. She was so drunk and had this look of pure insanity in her eyes. I pushed the door closed and yelled at her to go to bed. I could hear her walk back to her room, but I couldn't fall back to sleep. The next morning when I woke up and went into the hallway, my heart dropped. I saw one of her steak knives was on the floor by my door. I got goosebumps all over my arms. All I could think about was her saying she would slit that guy's throat. I confronted her about it, and she said she didn't remember trying to push my door open. She said she didn't even remember telling me about her ex. I had enough. My lease was a month to month, so I found a new spot and moved out. About a month after I moved out, she contacted me. I was at the movies and my phone was going off. When I got out, I turned on my phone. And to my shock, I received 40 plus text messages she had sent me over the past 2 hours. They were all just insane texts that ranged from everything between "Hi, how are you?" to "I absolutely hate you." It was insane. I didn't respond, and I never heard from her again. I always wonder if I hadn't set my dresser in front of my door, would she have quietly come into my room and slit my throat? It still freaks me out today.